Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and today we'll be exploring 19th century horror with the Call of Cthulhu setting, Cthulhu by Gaslight. First published as a box set in 1986, it was later expanded as a rulebook in 1988 and then updated to its third edition in 2012. These editions have all won numerous awards over the years. The latest incarnation isn't one book but two. The 294-page Investigator's Guide in December 2024, followed by the 261-page Gaslight Keeper's Guide in 2025, all expanded and updated to the current 7th edition Call of Cthulhu rule set. Chaosium also offers us two special edition leatherette versions in Victorian green, which they've assured isn't as horribly toxic like the real Victorian green. They're pretty. I purchased the Investigator's Guide version for my wife, but the reason that I didn't purchase the leatherette Keeper's Guide is that the spine only says Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu by Gaslight, and doesn't specify which book it is. Kind of unfortunate. As you can probably guess by the title and the covers, Cthulhu by Gaslight is set in 1890s, mostly aimed at Victorian London. Now this was a time of great societal change, that steam engine, the foggy streets that were lit by gas lamps, and Jack the Ripper stalking them at night, all immortalized in popular stories like Sherlock Holmes and Dracula. Finally, you have been talking up Cthulhu by Gaslight since we first discovered Call of Cthulhu. And then, once this new edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight finally dropped, we've been playing it for a full freaking year now, and I was beginning to wonder if we were ever going to review it or not. Hey, I'm Jack the NPC, consulting detective and sidekick to this jerk who insists that we put some serious playtime into a game before reviewing it. So now that I have some serious playtime under my belt, I am ready to give my thoughts and my criticisms and praises and answer the questions that most people should know before purchasing Cthulhu by Gaslight. But first, a word from our sponsor, Pocket Bard. Setting the perfect mood for a game often requires the right music or ambience to immerse you and your players into the story, but nothing can kill that mood faster than having to stop and scroll through a bunch of menus and controls just to get to the right ones. You're a game master, you've already got a ton of stuff on your plate and you've got to keep the game going, so that's where Pocket Bard comes in. It's a music and soundscape app that's easy for game masters to use without pulling their attention away from the game. It offers us an array of audio scenes to fit your game and immerse your players from fantasy essentials like towns, taverns, and dungeon layers to sci-fi ones like Starship or Derelict Station to horror scenes, a favorite one of mine, as well as cyberpunk and northern frozen landscapes. And in each of those, you can choose different types of music, exploring and combat with various elements like wind, rain, or various sounds that you could drop in there. And you can control the levels of each, turning them on or off, or you can just simply turn the music part off altogether and if you just want the ambient sounds to be playing in the background. And it all blends and fades in, so there isn't any sort of jarring changes that makes a shift from one song or one background to another. Now, we don't have time to go into all the stuff that you can do and how easy it is to use, but you can download Pocket Bard at the App Store and you'll have access to 17 forever free fantasy essentials. And you can go ahead and check those out and try it and see how much you like it. And just so you know, Pocket Bard's art and audio and all of their sound effects is all 100% human-made by real people. It is not AI slop. So go ahead and hit the link below to try Pocket Bard out, and you can immerse your players into great audio while focusing on what matters most. Your story. And now back to the video. So what do you need to play Cthulhu by Gaslight? Well, unlike the other Call of Cthulhu settings where you need to have the regular Call of Cthulhu Keeper's Guide followed by the setting guide, whichever one it is, Cthulhu by Gaslight includes the full game rules, so all you need is the two Cthulhu by Gaslight books. At least in theory here. There are a few things that are missing from the Gaslight books. For example, while the Gaslight Investigator's Guide offers us 35 Gaslight-era occupations, it then says how to convert 31 more occupations from the regular Investigator's Handbook. So, well, no, you don't need to have the Call of Cthulhu Investigator's Handbook in order to play Gaslight. It is pretty useful in expanding all the different, possible player occupations that you can use, some of which I really feel should have just been offered in the Gaslight book from the get-go. Now, that's more than I can say for spells. The Gaslight Keeper Guide offers us some great selections of mythos tomes that were available in the era. I love the fact that they finally gave us illustrations for many of these Mythos tomes, most of which I have never seen an image of before. Now, most of these tomes are perfectly available to buy locally or find at the British Museum and check them out there. However, spell descriptions are not given in the Gaslight Keeper's Guide, so game masters will either need to get the regular Keeper's Guide or pick up the Grand Grimoire of Cthulhu Mythos Magic, a great book and one that I do recommend that keepers pick up just normally, but you will need to have one of those books if you want to have spell descriptions. So while they say that you don't need to have the regular Call of Cthulhu books in order to run Cthulhu by Gaslight, it's really something that's just mostly true. I'd say that Gaslight is 95% of the complete Call of Cthulhu rules. So no, you don't need to own the Keeper's Guide in order to run Gaslight, but I would strongly recommend that you have that. The book offers options for both regular Call of Cthulhu investigators and Pulp Cthulhu heroes, including Victorian-era pulp abilities and Victorian weird science devices. However, anyone wanting to do Pulp Cthulhu by Gaslight will still require to pick up the Pulp Cthulhu book. Victorian Pulp Cthulhu is great, but let's just go ahead and call it what it is. It's freaking steampunk, and that is absolutely fine by us. Now, because this uses the Call of Cthulhu 7th edition rules mechanics, I'm not going to go into how the mechanics of this game work. I've already got a giant 9-part series breaking down the regular Call of Cthulhu rules. So instead, I'm going to focus this review on what makes Cthulhu by Gaslight different. First, while I touched on character occupations, and we still have the credit rating stat, which represents a character's financial ranking, and this is something that can go up or down, the big difference in Gaslight is that we also have social class. The class system is very much alive in Victorian England at the time and is broken down into 4 categories. Upper class, who are your noble-born elites, then your middle class, your more well-respected and well-moneyed commoners, and then your working class, who are your everyday laborers and clerks, and finally the criminal class, who are either criminals or occupations frequently associated with criminal behavior. While social class is very often related to a character's credit rating, it's also a separate thing entirely, such as you can have an upper-class noble who might not have much money and find themselves, borrowing from or marrying into a rich middle-class family. I mean, yeah, they're still a noble even if they are flat broke. On the flip side, it does not matter how much fame or money you develop as somebody in the middle class. I mean, you might be some millionaire business owner, but you will never, ever break into that upper class snobbery. All of the character occupations each list an appropriate social class, such as an antiquarian may be a suitable occupation for middle or upper class characters. Aristocrats are only available to upper class, while blacksmiths and cabbies are only working class occupations. Now, mechanically, there are a few ways that we can use social class. First is when a character is attempting to do some sort of social role against an NPC, such as charm, fast talk, or persuade. A character of a higher social class has a better chance for success against someone of a lower social class. And there are a couple ways that we can go about doing this. First, the easiest way is if you're of a higher social class than your target, then you have a bonus die when you're attempting these social roles. Now, if you're a lower class than your target, then you incur a penalty die when trying to convince them of something. Or we can use this table for a more complicated and realistic method where each class level of separation between the characters and their targets imposes more modifiers, such as an upper class character would receive a bonus die when trying to charm or persuade a middle class NPC, and then 2 bonus die when they're attempting that on a working class or criminal class NPCs. On the flip side, a criminal class character would require a hard difficulty against a working class NPC, extreme difficulty against a middle class one, and then an extreme difficulty plus a penalty die when trying to convince an upper class NPC of something, which that is really, really difficult to make that roll. Having used both methods of this, I can tell you with some confidence that not only does that big table method cause a lot of confusion because, players are always trying to get it straight. Do I have 1 bonus die and 2 penalty die, plus it has to be a hard or an extreme success and that sort of thing, but it makes it near impossible for somebody of a lower or criminal class to ever get a successful roll against somebody of an upper class, no matter how good their skill rolls are. So my recommendation to you is just to keep it to the simple method that if they're a lower class than you, you give yourself a bonus die, and if they're a higher class than you give yourself a penalty die. You might even splurge and do the method where you could have up to 2 bonus or penalty dies if they're 2 or more steps removed from you, but always just keep it at regular difficulty because that really seemed to be the sweet spot for our table. Additionally, because people of different social classes have entirely different ways of viewing the world, different priorities, different values, different taboos, and different life experiences, attempting a psychology check on a character of a different social class than yourself, even if they're higher or lower, incurs a penalty die. This represents how that class divide is so profound that it's even difficult to understand the mindset of somebody who is of a different social class than yourself. Now, of course, player characters being player characters, they might try to disguise themselves as belonging to either a higher or lower social class than they really belong to. However, there is a little bit more to that than just simply putting on some different clothes and introducing yourself by a different name. You know, the way they talk, the way they carry themselves, the health of their teeth and their skin. There are 100 variables that can give them away as to what social class they really are. So characters will need to make a successful acting or disguise roll in order to pass themselves off as belonging to a different social class. And depending on the situation, keepers might add a penalty die to this roll or a penalty die on any social rolls made while that character is disguised. Personally, I really dig this rule. I mean, Sherlock Holmes was constantly putting himself in various disguises to mingle with the different groups of society, so this really fits along those lines. However, my recommendation here is if a player character is going to try to disguise themselves as being somebody of a different social class than they are, you either A, have it where they have a penalty die on that disguise check, but if they make it, they get to do all the social checks just at regular difficulty because everybody believes that they're of the social class that they're representing. Or B, you have it be where it's just a regular disguise check or acting check that they have to make. However, they're going to have a penalty die on all social rolls they make while they're trying to do this as somebody of a different class that they belong to. Now, unless, of course, they make a hard or an extreme success on that regular acting and disguise check, then they ain't going to have any penalties at all. The idea is that you want the player characters to be able to do this while also not making it too difficult for them to even attempt it. And regardless whether they succeed at that disguise or acting roll or not, the player character is still going to incur a penalty die on all psychology rolls for NPCs that are of a different social class than that character normally belongs to, which that penalty die on psychology checks really ended up being a big deal in our games because, my players, they use the psychology roll all the time, and that ended up becoming a really big hurdle for a lot of situations. All in all, I really dig these social class rules. It's one of those things that sets Cthulhu by Gaslight apart from just regular Call of Cthulhu. It makes it feel different, but in a way that's very easy to understand how that Victorian class system worked because as a 21st century American, it is really alien to me how that worked, but I think that they did a good job of being able to capture that in an easy to follow and easy to understand, explain to your players sort of mechanic. Another very interesting social mechanic is a person's reputation, because that is a very big deal for Victorian characters, and any characters who act inappropriately or they risk damaging their reputation. Now, this is presented as an optional rule in the book, but this is one that I really personally dig a lot. In game terms, a character can get a bad reputation if they're seen being violent or rude or just acting weird or dishonest or disrespectful of anybody who's of an upper class themselves. All the stuff that player characters have a tendency to do. And if they're seen, then people are going to gossip and tell each other all about it, and that character can earn a bad reputation. And that means that they suffer a penalty die on all charm, fast talk, persuade, reassure, and credit rating rolls because people don't trust that character because they have heard things. On the other hand, any character who has a bad reputation gains a bonus die to any intimidation rolls that they make, which, some characters, they might find that be pretty beneficial for their character to have a bad reputation because people will know that they are dangerous. Repairing one's reputation requires a conscious effort on the player character's part, changing their behavior, maybe making a big public apology of some sort, paying damages or making a huge public donation to some sort of charity, and then with time and then a successful luck roll, the character can reclaim their reputation. I really dig this rule because it keeps players mindful of their character's behavior, and it's a good way of applying some mechanical consequences for either acting uncivilized or being just weird, either intentionally or unintentionally. An ill-timed bout of madness, and they go running down the streets of London screaming about how the shadow people are listening in. Yeah, people are going to talk about that. Next, let's talk about investigator skills. For the most part, the available skills are the same ones that you would find in 1920s Call of Cthulhu. I mean, it's only a 30-year difference there, so most of the skills and how they work are all unchanged. There are a few minor differences, of course, such as Drive Auto has now been changed to Drive Carriage during the Gaslight era. But there are two Gaslight skills that I want to focus some attention on. First is mesmerism. This replaces hypnosis in regular Call of Cthulhu, but is a whole lot more powerful. It's more akin to how hypnosis works in Pulp Cthulhu. It is clearly meant to emulate the mesmerism that you find in many of the old Victorian tales, and it can be used in three different ways. First is to alleviate pain. On a successful check, it allows characters to ignore the pain damage and possibly ignoring the effect of a major wound or pushing themselves past the point where they'd normally fall unconscious. Now, 1d6 rounds isn't a lot of time, but there are situations that this skill might really save the day. Second is alleviating mental trauma. Now, this is where it's probably going to be used the most frequently in your game. First, a successful check can recover 1d3 sanity points by repressing memories of whatever happened. Now, this one is great. We have a way in the middle of an adventure that a character can recover 1d3 sanity points. That is a big damn deal. Now, second, it can be used to temporarily negate the effects of a character's phobia, either for a few minutes or until the end of a given scene. Both of these are wonderful to have in a Call of Cthulhu game. Now, the third way that mesmerism can be used is to alter an NPC's memories, causing them to forget things or even implanting false memories. Now, this one is delightfully devious. It's borderline a Pulp Cthulhu talent, but this is a skill, meaning that any character can do this if they just get the skill for it. Now, the only problem with mesmerism is it starts off at 1%, so players are going to need to invest a good chunk of their starting skill points in this one to get it up to a level that could be usable, but all in all, I really love the fact that this skill is in here. Next, and this is one of my favorite new skills for Call of Cthulhu that they've added. I believe that they first introduced this in Regency Cthulhu, and I hope to see it slowly working its way into future releases as a normal base skill in just regular old Call of Cthulhu, and that's Reassure. With this skill, a character can offer comfort to another character, giving them +2 sanity points. Now, that might not sound like much, but it can make a huge difference in the middle of a game, especially if they're getting close to their indefinite insanity limit. Just being able to raise their sanity pool by 2 can be a really big deal. It can only be performed once per character per adventure or campaign chapter, so there is a limitation on how often this can be used. This skill can also half the duration of temporary insanity, allow a character to ignore a phobia, and also help a character see through their delusions and hallucinations. So this is already the best skill for helping the sanity of another character out if you're in the middle of an adventure. I can think of so many times over the years that this would have been great if anybody in my group had had this skill at some point. But the best part is that instead of it starting off at a base skill of 1% like mesmerism does, or the psychoanalysis that you would have in later eras, and the players, they have to pump a bunch of their starting skill points into this very obscure skill just to get it up to a decent level of success. Reassure starts at 1/5 of a character's appearance score. So if you have an app score of 50, your Reassure skill starts off at 10%. If your app is 75, then you start off with a 15 in your Reassure automatically. We freaking love this. I mean, we have been saying for years that there need to be more skills in Call of Cthulhu that use a character's stats as their initial base value. Kind of like how Dodge uses player characters' dexterity to determine whatever it starts out as. So now, to give us this really great skill that's really useful in helping other characters out with their sanity and trying to get them past that, and then using appearance as the stat that's used to determine the base value for that, the most popular dump stat in all of Call of Cthulhu, and now it's a very valuable stat to have because it helps you out with this really great skill. That is freaking brilliant. I hope that we get more skills that use stats this way, and I also hope that every supplement and every setting going forward uses the Reassure skill because, for us, we're going to be using Reassure in every Call of Cthulhu adventure we do from now on, no matter what time period it's set in. Carriage chases are also given some special attention here. While car and foot chase rules appear in the regular Call of Cthulhu rulebook, horse-drawn carriages have a few differences between those, so the Gaslight book focuses their attention on that. The carriage chase rules are an absolute blast, and Seth was giddy with joy when one of our adventures took an unexpected turn and we found ourselves in a big old carriage chase, and it was cinematic and fun, and those rules worked flawlessly. However, the Gaslight book only offers us the barest minimum explanation of the regular Call of Cthulhu chase rules, mostly focusing on what's new for Carriages in this version, so there's no problem if you're someone who is already familiar with how 7th edition chase rules work, or already owns the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu Keeper guide, but I'm not entirely sure if this stripped-down explanation of the chase rules is enough for Game Master who only has access to the Gaslight rules to really fully get how chase rules work in Call of Cthulhu. So I'm not really sure if this would be an issue or not, but it's something that I figured I would go ahead and mention. It was an issue for my group because I'm very familiar with how the chase rules work, so I didn't have any difficulty just kind of porting it over and adding the new stuff to it, but I'm not entirely sure how easy it would be to understand for somebody who only had the Cthulhu by Gaslight books and didn't have access to the regular Call of Cthulhu Keeper guide. Okay, so that is mostly it for the rules mechanics portion. Let's go ahead and talk about the setting itself. While 1890s Gaslight adventures can take place anywhere in the world, India, Egypt, the jungles of darkest Africa, even the Americas, maybe hunting down the devil in the White City in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. But the setting is primarily focused on Great Britain. Most especially, it's aimed at the city of London. The Investigator's Guide offers us with this map of the city, which is just spectacular in how much detail it has. The physical book comes with this 4-panel, 16 by 20 inch map, which is really nice to lay out on the table as a visual aid. Unfortunately, it's just so small that a lot of that detail gets lost. So for my group, I ordered this larger 23 by 29 map off of Chaosium's Redbubble store, and it has worked fantastic for us. Urban campaigns can be a lot of fun as we develop repeat NPCs and favored familiar locations that the player characters keep going back to again and again. Being an ancient city with millions of inhabitants, London serves as a fantastic campaign setting for your group. And the supernatural horrors, they aren't always out in some remote locations, somewhere off in the boonies, but in the streets and the sewers and abandoned buildings beside a thriving metropolis. I've done a video on tips for running a city campaign, so I recommend that any keepers out there go ahead and check that out if you're wanting to do Cthulhu by Gaslight and set it in London. Now, one section of the book that I found particularly interesting was a section covering Rookeries. These are these tangled slum zones that appear at several locations in the city. Buildings are haphazardly stacked on top of one another. They're just unmappable labyrinths of human misery. The Gaslight Keeper's Guide gives us some information about them, as well as some potential encounters that we might have if the player characters visit a rookery. Now, personally, I wish that this table had been split up into 2 tables. One for the people and what occupies each space, and then another for the hazards and obstacles that we might encounter there. First, hazards and obstacles should be far more common than just being 1% of all the things that get rolled on this table. Having it there at the end means that only 1% of all your rolls are going to come up with that result. They should have stuck this one in the very middle of the table instead of at the very end. But also, when we're performing a chase through a rookery, I feel that a very short table of random hazards and different things that our characters might have to leap over, dodge behind, that would have been really useful to have put in here. Rookeries are really fun to use. In one of our games, the bad guy managed to get away at the end of one of the adventures. So a few weeks after that, they start sending us all these threats because they're trying to get back the mythos tomes that we had stolen from them. And yeah, we were going to be giving those back. So we managed to track them down to a rookery. And seriously, that place was rough. But they and their minions, they were hiding out in some single little one-room apartment above a business somewhere. So we asked Seth, hey, what business is it that they're hiding out above? So he rolls on some table and he's like, it's a cat skinner's. And we're like, what in the hell is a cat skinner's? So we ended up looking that up and yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like it is. Somehow, in our horror-themed Call of Cthulhu game, the most horrifying thing that we encountered was just real Victorian history. A good portion of the books is dedicated to the Victorian popularity of spiritualism and the occult. Seances were very in fashion, and the investigators get to determine if a particular medium is the real deal or just a trickster fraud. Ancient Egypt was also very popular, with Victorians purchasing all manner of plundered relics or hosting unwrapping parties where they'd spend an evening unwrapping a mummy. Occasionally these mummies, they might protest being disturbed, or their spirits might seek out a newer and moister host to inhabit. And while the book does does spend some time discussing clubs and secret societies, one that it pays a lot of attention to is the Golden Dawn. From their very real history, notable members, their ceremonies initiating members to the various ranks, to their teachings of real magic and their extreme focus on astral projection in the astral plane. We get a lot of stuff about the astral plane, its creatures and dangers, its relation to the mythos and astral combat. There is so much here that they offer on that subject, but at the same time, I wish they included more to it than just that. I mean, the ways that this can be worked into various adventures, or ways that we can have the player characters enter the astral plane in just the course of a normal adventure, and what benefits or what dangers that might pose to them. It can really change how a regular Call of Cthulhu investigation can be performed when the characters have going into the astral plane as an option to them. I'd also love to see some future adventure releases where it's assumed that the player characters just belong to the Golden Dawn. It's it's required that they be in the Golden Dawn to even do this adventure, and have certain things like astral projection and astral combat and astral creatures all just be worked into this adventure that the players can do. Oh yeah, I mean, with as much information as they give us about the Golden Dawn in those books, and they give us quite a bit, I still feel that they should have given us more. I mean, some sort of step-by-step walkthrough of what it takes to go through the various ranks, what all is involved with astral projection and the different ways that can be used and the different dangers involved. Give us some sort of examples and walk us through that. Maybe give us an adventure or two that is centered around astral projection and the Golden Dawn. I mean, that'd be pretty freaking sweet right there. I mean, I would love to see an entire dedicated supplement given exclusively to the Golden Dawn and what all that can be used for in Cthulhu by Gaslight. In addition to the regular Lovecraftian mythos, Cthulhu by Gaslight offers us some horrors from British folklore and fiction, from pagan rites and folk horror to fairies. We also get profiles and stats for several literary characters from that time. Some of them being potential allies, while others, not so much. Spring Hill Jack, Captain Nemo, Dr. Moreau, Dorian Gray, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Then of course the vampires, Carmilla and Count Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and the Martians from War of the Worlds. H.G. Wells, not Orson Welles. I love having all of these in here, especially because, one of the shows that I rewatched in order to get myself in the whole Cthulhu by Gaslight frame of mind before we ran it is I rewatched Penny Dreadful, where a lot of those same characters appear, and it's just also a good excuse to rewatch it because I really love that show, at least the first 2 seasons. Overall, I am really pleased with Cthulhu by Gaslight. It's a setting that I have been looking forward to for years, and it did not disappoint once it finally released. I like the fact that they made it self-contained so players could just pick it up without requiring that they go out and they purchase the regular Call of Cthulhu rulebooks. But because it lacks descriptions and stats for common spells and Cthulhu monsters like you'd have if you just picked up the Keeper's Guide to begin with, game masters will either need to pick up the Keeper's Guide for the basics or pick up the more thorough Grand Grimoire or the Malleus Monstorium, which those are both great books and I highly recommend them, but I feel it'd be easier and cheaper if game masters just went ahead and got the regular Call of Cthulhu Keeper's Guide if they were starting off with Cthulhu by Gaslight. And then with a list of additional professions that appear in the regular Call of Cthulhu Investigator's Guide, I feel that technically, yes, game masters wouldn't need to pick up the regular Call of Cthulhu books if they just want to start off with Gaslight and just pick up the 2 Gaslight books. That is technically true. I do agree with that. However, if they pick those up and they decide that they like Call of Cthulhu or just Cthulhu by Gaslight, I would recommend that picking up the Keeper's Guide and regular Investigator's Guide be a top priority as far as being the next books they should pick up. They've also started releasing some additional Cthulhu by Gaslight books. There's a new collection of adventures, as well as an upcoming campaign that they're going to be releasing that's exclusively for the Gaslight era, and I'm really looking forward to checking that out. But overall, despite any complaints that I have, I give this new version of Cthulhu by Gaslight a huge thumbs up. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, RPG philosophy, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, investigators, you have a great day. One benefit to playing RPGs that are set in the real world is getting to visit those real world locations from the game. It's kind of like last year when you did your big vacation to the UK and people were asking you, hey Seth, are you going to visit 221B Baker Street or are you going to go to platform 9 3/4? And you were like, Why the hell would I do that? Those are not even real places. I mean, yeah, they're real places now just because they were built so tourists could go there and get pictures. Nah, I'm going to the places where the real history happened, such as we spent 2 days in the British Museum, where our player character went insane that one time, or going to Cleopatra's Needle, where our characters met near Tabletop, or to the very top of St. Paul's, where we did that huge banishing ceremony that one time, or out to Stonehenge, where we murdered all those cultists before they could summon a goddess, or to 33 Golden Square, the same house that our player characters lived in Cthulhu by Gaslight. I mean, yeah, fantasy worlds are cool and everything, and they're a lot of fun, but they will never, ever give you that same feeling as standing in the same spot that your player characters did.